deep in the ancient ridges of Appalachia, where civilization fades into primordial darkness. 11 documented cases of terror have been carefully buried by time. Until now. From the Bell Witch that tormented an entire Tennessee family for 4 years straight, witnessed by hundreds, including a future U.S. president, to the modern-day Appalachian Trail Stalker who deliberately breaks hikers' legs in remote sections where no one can hear you scream. These aren't campfire tales or urban legends. These are verified accounts extracted from police reports, university studies, historical documents, and first-hand testimonies that local communities have tried to forget. The Cherokee warned early settlers about these mountains for good reason. Some places on Earth were never meant for human habitation. Each story you're about to hear has been cross-referenced with multiple independent sources, because the truth is far more terrifying than fiction. If you're brave enough to uncover what really lurks in America's oldest mountain range, hit that subscribe button on Verified Fears right now. Because once you start this journey into documented darkness, there's no turning back. Let's begin with story number 1. And I promise you, by the time we reach number 11, you'll never look at the Appalachian Mountains the same way again. Let's move to our first story. The chilling tale of the Bell Witch, one of the most thoroughly documented hauntings in American history. A saga that left scars on the Tennessee landscape and transformed folklore into fact. In the early autumn of 1817, the Bell family, headed by John Bell Sr., his wife, Lucy Bell, and their children, including the youngest daughter, Betsy Bell, lived on a sprawling farm in Robertson County, Tennessee. The Bells were respected community members, hard-working, God-fearing, and generous. With their homestead nestled at the edge of woods that locals had always regarded as slightly unnerving. The air was dense with legends, but the Bell family had never put stock in ghost tales until disturbing events began threading their way into the quiet march of their lives. It started with odd noises in the dark. John Bell was the first to notice the faint tapping, echoing footsteps, and muffled voices that seemed to come from nowhere, reverberating through the log walls after sunset. At first, he suspected rodents, or perhaps pranksters from nearby farms. He checked every nook. Traps were set, boards examined, locks triple-checked. But nothing could explain what followed. Within weeks, the sounds escalated. Scratching intensified into thrashing, the noises now pounding loudly enough to wake the household on moonless nights. Furniture shifted by itself. Doors creaked open and slammed shut with force, and household items vanished only to reappear in impossible places. The Bells' children began to complain of invisible hands tugging their hair, pinching skin, and chilling whispers that urged them to get out still. John Bell tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. The local pastor was called. Prayers were offered in every room. Neighbors joined in vigil after dark. But the phenomenon only grew in strength, finally drawing the Bell family into the full grip of terror. When Lucy Bell fell ill for weeks with no explanation, a sudden wasting, exhaustion, and purplish bruising, whispers spread around Adams, the small town nearby. Betsy Bell, only 12 years old, was next. Unseen forces assaulted her nightly, leaving scratches and welts, the kind that no living hand could have inflicted. Betsy's cries echoed through the Tennessee night, sometimes joined by guttural laughter, as if something both wicked and gleeful was playing games with her sanity. Over time, the entity identified itself as Kate, sometimes called the Bell Witch by locals. Its voice grew clear and distinct, speaking in coarse Southern English that couldn't be attributed to any family member. "John Bell, you old rascal, I'm gonna get you." It would hiss aloud, audible to any visitor brave enough to enter the house. Word spread beyond the county line. Scores of skeptical neighbors poured in, desperate to witness something, anything. Most left shaken, muttering prayers beneath their breath, some swearing off ever returning after being slapped or taunted by the unseen presence. Here's where the story shifts from legend to documented fact. Andrew Jackson, then a general and future president, had heard whispers of Adams's haunted farm. In 1819, convinced either to prove or disprove the tale, Jackson arrived on horseback with his entourage, carrying both bravado and firearms. The Bell Witch greeted him with derision, preventing his carriage from advancing with force that neither horse nor man could resist. Jackson's men, terrified by the inexplicable chaos, retreated before dawn, leaving Adams and the Bell Witch undisturbed. The haunting stretched across nearly 4 years. The Bell Witch played cruel tricks, prophesying deaths, revealing secrets nobody should have known, mimicking voices and causing family members to collapse in fear. John Bell Sr. bore the brunt. His health deteriorated rapidly, with unaccountable fits and numbness that led neighbors to suspect the witch was slowly killing him. On December 20th, 1820, John Bell died abruptly. According to family lore and local documents, a vial of black, unknown liquid was found beside his bed. A poison, the witch bragged, administered by her own hand. As local historian David Crockett, not the famous frontiersman, but a distant relation, recorded in 19th century papers, no malady nor known cause explained his passing, save for the power of Kate, the Bell Witch. Hours after John's funeral, the Bell Witch sang triumphantly through the walls a drunken song, then announced to the huddled, shocked guests, "John is gone, and I'm satisfied." As quickly as she had arrived, the entity faded, sometimes reappearing briefly to harass Betsy or Lucy, but never again with the same intensity. By 1821, peace was nominally restored, but the Bells never spoke of life returning to normal. Betsy Bell, wrought with grief and trauma, eventually broke off her engagement to a local man after the witch threatened both their lives. Lucy lived out her years under a veil of suspicion and sorrow. How do we know this story is more than mere myth? The Bell Witch haunting is documented in contemporary court and church records, local papers, and attested by dozens of respected citizens. The earliest detailed account comes from Martin Van Buren Ingram's 1894 book, An Authenticated History of the Bell Witch, which draws from written testimony, eyewitness interviews, and physical evidence collected by Adams residents. The Adams Church even lists the Bell Witch as a reason for special meetings and prayers in logs from 1818 onward. Skeptics have tried to explain these incidents. Maybe mass hysteria, shared delusions, or even clever trickery by aggrieved family members. Yet the sheer volume and consistency of witness statements, especially those from visitors with no personal stake in the Bell's drama, including military officers and ministers, leave many historians uneasy. Some locals assert Kate still haunts northwest Tennessee. Reports of strange lights, unexplained voices, and sudden illness in the area remain common. Paranormal investigators have insisted that the Bell Witch Cave, a limestone cavern near the original homestead, remains one of the most active supernatural hotspots in the United States, with visitors reporting cold spots, sudden gusts, and voices in the dark. Reddit users continue to post their own experiences visiting the site, many describing electronic equipment malfunctions, ghostly touches, and the disturbing feeling of being watched. One Redditor recounts, "I didn't believe in any of it, but my phone died twice, and I heard a woman laughing, echoing through the rocks. I ran out, and I swear I saw a shadow move behind me. I never went back." Why has this haunting endured for more than 2 centuries? Perhaps because it's not just a tale of terror, but a collision between fact and folklore. The Bell Witch story is cited in Tennessee history lessons and has spawned plays, novels, documentaries, and films. But most importantly, it serves as an eerie reminder that some places in Appalachia harbor secrets deeper than their misty forests and hidden caves. Is it possible the Bell family themselves played a role in the haunting, wittingly or unwittingly, by opening their lives to scrutiny, inviting outsiders, and thus fueling the witch's appetite for attention? Or did they fall prey to forces beyond comprehension, forever marked by the mountain's old, restless soul? What stands undisputed is the toll. A respected patriarch dead under bizarre circumstances, a family shattered, a region stigmatized. The Bell Witch remains what historians call America's only authenticated haunting, cemented by legal records and newspaper accounts stretching from Adams to Nashville. As the sun set on that remote stretch of Tennessee farmland, for the final time in December 1820, neighbors whispered to each other, "The witch is gone, but the lesson remains. Never mock the unknown. Never doubt what the mountains can hide." Even today, descendants of the Bell family decline interviews, and local guides warn visitors not to stay after nightfall. The Bell Witch Cave is protected by local ordinance and visited by thousands each year, a pilgrimage site for those who crave living proof of ghosts, but also a somber spot for those who've learned firsthand the price of disturbing Appalachian secrets. So next time you're traveling rural Tennessee and the dusk starts creeping through twisted branches, remember the Bell family's warnings and ask yourself, how many of these remote mountain stories have we really left behind? And if you hear a voice calling your name in the dark, will you recognize it as family? Or something far older, far colder, watching from the shadows? Thus ends our first disturbing true horror story from the Appalachian Mountains. The legacy of the Bell Witch, a nightmare so potent it forced history itself to record its passage. Let's move to our second story. The eerie phenomenon famously known as the Mothman sightings, which terrorized the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, between 1966 and 1967. Unlike other Appalachian legends that simmer quietly as folklore, the Mothman episode exploded into national consciousness, with eyewitness accounts, police reports, and tragic consequences linked to one of the deadliest bridge collapses in U.S. history. The story begins on November 15th, 1966, when two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette, embarked on a double date through the woods just outside of Point Pleasant. As their car headlights swept a dark, wooded curve known locally as the TNT area, a site infamous for its now-abandoned World War II munitions factory, an unsettling entity appeared. Witnesses described the creature as a humanoid figure with a massive wingspan estimated at nearly 10 feet, large gray body feathers, and most chillingly, piercing red eyes that glowed vividly in the night. Multiple police reports confirmed the couples raced away in terror after the creature apparently chased their car at unbelievably high speeds of up to 100 miles per hour, flying alongside them and disappearing only after reaching the outskirts of town. Fearful to report what seemed too absurd, the couples finally went to the Point Pleasant police station the following day, setting in motion an investigative frenzy that gripped the entire region. The initial report was published in the local paper, the Point Pleasant Register, on November 16, 1966, under the headline, "Couples See Man-Sized Bird, Creature." Something, instantly capturing the public's imagination. Quickly, more sightings poured in, over 100 reported incidents within the following year. involving residents who described similar characteristics. Gigantic wings, a humanoid figure, and those unmistakable glowing red eyes. Among the witnesses were volunteer firemen who claimed to have seen a large bird with red eyes. Mason County Sheriff George Johnson, who initially dismissed the reports as enlarged heron sightings, and other locals who reported strange television interference and mysterious noises. Researchers, including wildlife biologists, suggested the creature could be a misidentified sandhill crane, a bird with a 7-foot wingspan and red markings around its eyes, though Point Pleasant wasn't part of the crane's migration route. What elevated the Mothman from regional curiosity to national legend was its supposed connection with one of the greatest tragedies in the area's history: the collapse of the Silver Bridge on December 15, 1967. This bridge connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with Gallipolis, Ohio, spanning the Ohio River and serving as a vital transportation link. On that fateful day, during rush hour, the Silver Bridge catastrophically failed when a single eye-bar, a critical suspension component, fractured due to stress corrosion and metal. Fatigue after nearly 40 years of service. The collapse unleashed chaos as 31 vehicles plunged into the icy river below, resulting in the deaths of 46 people and injuries to 9 others. One witness described the horrific scene. "It didn't just fall into the river. It sort of slithered like a snake, then it buckled and cars began falling off sideways." In the weeks and months preceding the collapse, sightings of the Mothman reportedly intensified. Eyewitnesses claimed to see the creature near the bridge, flying back and forth as if warning inhabitants of impending doom. This gave rise to the theory that the Mothman was a supernatural harbinger, a dark omen announcing the disaster to come. Although engineering investigations by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, conclusively identified the metallurgical failure as the cause, folklore and the local community embraced the haunting myth. The bridge's catastrophic failure severed economic ties, traumatized families, and altered the course of Point Pleasant's development forever. The federal government estimated that rerouting traffic cost $1 million monthly, and major local employers closed down in the aftermath. Following the collapse, reports of the Mothman abruptly stopped, further fueling belief that the creature's purpose was to herald tragedy rather than cause it. To this day, the Mothman has become enshrined in local culture, celebrated annually in festivals and memorialized in books, documentaries, and films, including the 2002 thriller The Mothman Prophecies, starring Richard Gere. But the story does not end there. The psychological impact on those who witnessed the creature was profound. Roger Scarberry, one of the original witnesses, remained haunted by the experience, often recounting how the creature's red eyes seemed to pierce his soul. Marcella Bennett, another witness on that same November night, was reportedly so terrified that she dropped her baby before retrieving it and running back into her house. Other residents reported nightmares and a lasting sense of dread throughout the period of sightings. The creature's nickname, Mothman, was actually inspired by Killer Moth, a villain from the Batman comic books, showing how popular culture immediately latched onto this mysterious phenomenon. The first documented sighting actually occurred 3 days earlier, on November 12, 1966, when gravediggers in nearby Clendenin, West Virginia, spotted a massive brown-winged human-like being soaring overhead from tree to tree. Paranormal investigators have returned to Point Pleasant multiple times in search of the Mothman, recording unexplained electronic disturbances and eerie sounds near the old TNT area and the Silver Bridge site. Some Salem, West Virginia residents reported strange patterns on their television sets, followed by mysterious noises outside. And when they shined flashlights toward the sounds, they witnessed 2 red eyes glowing back at them like reflectors. Skeptics dismiss the phenomenon as mass hysteria or mistaken animal sightings. However, the consistency of eyewitness testimony and the strange circumstances surrounding the bridge collapse invite ongoing debate. Dr. Robert L. Smith, a wildlife biologist, insisted that all sightings fit the description of a sandhill crane, but couldn't explain why multiple witnesses described flight speeds impossible for any known bird. The economic and social impact extended far beyond the immediate tragedy. The collapse severed the economic lifeline between Point Pleasant and Gallipolis, and when the replacement Silver Memorial Bridge opened 2 years later, it bypassed Point Pleasant entirely, fundamentally altering the town's destiny. Route 35 no longer ran through the heart of the community that had been forever changed by both supernatural terror and very real tragedy. Some locals consider the Mothman a guardian spirit, attempting to warn the living of danger. Others view it as a sinister presence, feeding on fear. The debate continues in online forums, with Reddit users sharing their own experiences visiting the area. Many describing electronic equipment malfunctions, sudden temperature drops, and the unsettling feeling of being watched in the woods around the old TNT site. What makes the Mothman phenomenon particularly compelling is its intersection with documented historical tragedy. Unlike many cryptid sightings that remain isolated incidents, the Mothman appeared during a specific 13-month period that culminated in a very real disaster with very real casualties. The timing was too precise, the witness accounts too consistent, and the aftermath too devastating to dismiss as mere coincidence. This terrifying chapter in Appalachian history speaks to the region's deep connection with the unknown, where ancient forests and forgotten places still whisper secrets to those brave enough to listen. The TNT area, with its abandoned bunkers and toxic soil from wartime munitions production, provided the perfect backdrop for something otherworldly to emerge from the shadows of industrial decay. And so, the Mothman remains a haunting symbol, not just of Point Pleasant, but of the Appalachian Mountains themselves. A place where fact and folklore collide in the shadows of towering peaks and dense woods, where the line between warning and prophecy blurs into something far more terrifying than fiction could ever achieve. Let's move to our third story, the chilling true haunting known as Bouncing Bertha, which occurred in 1938 in the remote areas of Powell Mountain, Lee County, Virginia. Unlike many ghost stories that linger as vague folklore, Bertha Seibert's story was a documented case of poltergeist activity that captivated the nation and drew the attention of university professors, church elders, and even national media. Bertha Seibert was a sweet, 9-year-old girl living with her grandmother in a rustic 3-room cabin deep in the Appalachian hollers. It began subtly, with Bertha complaining about strange noises during the night and restless sleep, but soon escalated to physical disturbances that terrified the entire family. The terror started when Bertha would hear creaking sounds getting closer and closer to her bed, and when she tried to peek out from under her covers, something would violently rip the sheets off the bed. According to eyewitness testimony collected decades later, including from Ralph, Bertha's cousin who attended school with her and lived nearby, the most terrifying aspect was the nightly bouncing of Bertha's bed. Ralph recalled how the bed would start to tremble, and it would start to shake, and then it would violently begin to shake, like literally bounce off the floor and back down again. And she would be laying there, completely still, terrified, doing nothing to cause it. Neighbors spoke of hearing eerie screams echoing through the wilderness that were so loud they echoed through the hollers surrounding the homestead. The haunting quickly escalated beyond just the bed. Objects moved on their own, dishes flew off tables during dinner, and furniture appeared to shake and levitate for no visible reason. One particularly disturbing incident involved Bertha sitting on a chair while someone played a banjo or guitar, and witnesses watched the chair wobble around the room. With the faster the music played, the faster the chair would rock. There were also accounts of people hearing horses galloping around the house 3 times, though no horses were visible anywhere, followed by doors flying open on their own. Bertha's grandmother, a strict woman steeped in mountain superstitions, believed the family was cursed by a mountain witch or a restless spirit. Taking no chances, neighbors summoned the local Baptist preacher and church elders to perform a spiritual cleansing. When the preacher attempted to place a cross on Bertha's forehead, the chair flew backwards, nearly 4 feet across the room, and a cold chill suddenly filled the air. On a cold autumn evening, nearly 60 townsfolk climbed the mountain and packed into the small cabin to confront the dark presence. Hymns filled the cramped rooms, and church leaders brandished Bibles and crosses while urging the spirit to depart. The preacher began the exorcism with, "In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, we rebuke you, Satan, we command you to flee from the child and vacate this home." The climax of the haunting came when the bed levitated with such force that 4 miners, each weighing nearly 200 pounds, grabbed hold of each bedpost and attempted to hold it down to the ground. Yet they couldn't stop the bouncing bed. Bertha, pale and emotionless, began speaking in some tongue that no one could understand, terrifying all who witnessed it. The crowd became so stunned and terrified that they began pressing backwards and fighting their way out the front door of the cabin. News of the haunting spread far beyond Virginia, crossing state lines and catching national attention. 2 professors from the University of Tennessee journeyed to the cabin to study the phenomena firsthand. During dinner at the cabin, all the meat flew off their plates and flew across the room, and their bowls of soup all turned over. And later that night, just like every previous evening, Bertha's bed continued to bounce uncontrollably. The professors, being men of education and firm believers in science, promptly hurried out of the cabin, commenting only that the events were peculiar and that they needed to hurry back to Tennessee to examine the evidence. This event sparked national interest, and soon the story of Bouncing Bertha was front-page news and the talk of every radio station all across America. Doctors came from Tennessee to visit Bertha's family, documenting all they had seen. The story became so famous that Houdini's wife was reportedly set to make the journey to the cabin in an attempt to prove that the events weren't real. In a controversial turn of events, the 2 University of Tennessee professors who had fled the cabin so hastily suddenly signed an agreement with a prominent scientific journal where they were paid to write an article stating that the entire events were fake. Their copyrighted results were then sold to newspapers all across America, which was enough to convince most folks that the haunting was a hoax. In a desperate attempt to find relief, Bertha's father decided to get the girl away from the cabin and had her spend the night at her cousin's house nearly 2 miles away, hoping to break the haunting. Yet the bed continued to bounce, proving that the phenomenon followed Bertha rather than being tied to the location. Superstitious remedies were tried, including placing silver coins under her pillow and shooting her picture with a silver bullet, traditionally believed to ward off evil, though these had little effect. The only known mitigation was placing a Bible under Bertha's head, which reportedly slowed down the spirit. Ralph, who witnessed the events as a child, recalled how Bertha would come to school with clear signs of sleep deprivation. She'd have these red eyes, and that she would have been crying, and that she was just exhausted. He described how terrifying it must have been for her, saying, "You can only imagine being that little and having these terrifying dreams and thoughts." After 35 consecutive nights of this terrifying ordeal, the haunting ceased as mysteriously as it began. The story captivated the nation, and everybody had an opinion, with folks traveling from all over America to Bertha's small cabin to witness the event. What made the case particularly compelling was the sheer number of credible witnesses, including church elders, university professors, and respected community members who all testified to witnessing impossible phenomena. The psychological impact on the community was profound. Ralph noted how the community was probably divided between the people who believed it and the people who didn't, and how awful it must have been for Bertha to know that people were talking about them, and to think that you were the cause of that, even though you were sort of helpless in that situation. What makes Bouncing Bertha's case particularly significant in paranormal research is the documentation and multiple independent witnesses. Unlike many ghost stories that rely on hearsay, this case involved university professors, church officials, law enforcement, and dozens of community members who all witnessed the same phenomena. The fact that the activity followed Bertha to different locations also distinguishes it from typical haunted house cases. The legacy of Bouncing Bertha lives on in Appalachian ghost lore as a rare, well-documented poltergeist case that reveals the region's deep-seated fears and unshakable belief in the supernatural. Local historians have preserved the story, and the tale continues to be passed down through generations, with eyewitnesses like Ralph sharing their memories decades later. Today, the story remains a powerful reminder of a time when the lines between reality and the paranormal blurred beneath the ancient Appalachian Mountains. Some say the cabin where Bertha lived still stands, though locals remain reluctant to discuss the family or the events that made national headlines. The case of Bouncing Bertha stands as one of the most thoroughly documented poltergeist cases in American history, a testament to the enduring mysteries that lurk in the shadow of Appalachian peaks. Let's move to our fourth story, the enduring mystery of the Brown Mountain Lights, a phenomenon that has haunted the remote ridges of Burke County, North Carolina, for centuries. Unlike fleeting apparitions or ghost stories limited to one family, these lights are observed regularly by hundreds of witnesses each year, locals, scientists, and hikers alike. With their existence documented in local newspapers, U.S. government investigations, and even the journals of Cherokee elders, the Brown Mountain Lights are not only legend, they are one of the Appalachian Mountains' most persistent and scientifically confounding mysteries. Brown Mountain itself rises starkly from the forests of western North Carolina, covered in thick pine and laurel, where the valley below is veiled in mist for much of the year. Before European settlers arrived, the local Cherokee and Catawba tribes regarded the lights as omens, supernatural signals from the ghosts of fallen warriors, or the spirits of unquiet ancestors wandering the ridges after nightfall. Early written records describe the Cherokee warning newcomers to avoid the mountain at dusk, for the wandering fire might reveal a secret no living soul should ever see. The first official mention of the Brown Mountain Lights dates back to 1913, when a fisherman wrote to the Charlotte Daily Observer describing odd, ghostly lights that hovered above the tree line, growing and shrinking, red and blue and white, like lanterns hoisted by invisible hands. Over the coming years, more and more reports surfaced. Railroad workers on the Carolina and Northwestern Railway claimed to see floating orbs above the mountain after heavy rains. Farmers described moonless nights when trembling fireballs appeared and drifted above the forests as if searching for something lost. This wasn't a single witness story. It was a documented mass experience, with dozens of independent accounts archived each year. In 1922, after widespread media coverage and growing curiosity, the U.S. Geological Survey conducted a formal investigation, teams spent weeks at Brown Mountain with cameras, telescopes, and journals. Their findings suggested the lights might be reflections of car headlights or distant lanterns. But locals quickly pointed out that sightings predated the advent of the automobile. These orbs had haunted Brown Mountain since before electricity reached the valleys. Journalists who visited the site often left unconvinced. In one widely cited account, a New York Times writer described seeing a blue orb, shimmering as if alive, dancing above the summit for nearly 7 minutes before vanishing with no sound or warning. The lights themselves vary in appearance. Witnesses describe everything from small, marble-sized spheres to large, glowing globes that pulse and fade like living creatures. Some appear in clusters, moving in patterns that seem almost intentional. They've hovered over treetops, darted close to the ground, and disappeared into the river below. Unlike meteors or lightning bugs, the Brown Mountain lights are silent, their presence accompanied only by an eerie stillness that descends on the mountain. During particularly active periods, such as after heavy rainfall, dozens of lights have been seen simultaneously, prompting impromptu gatherings of locals who trek up the mountain roads hoping for a glimpse of the supernatural. Over the decades, scientists have proposed many explanations, though none have been proven or universally accepted. Some suggest natural gases such as phosphine or methane may ignite spontaneously, producing brief flashes or sustained low flames. Others theorize that rare electrical phenomena, ball lightning or even piezoelectric discharges from compressed quartz in the region's bedrock, are responsible. Every explanation is countered by the fact that the lights are sometimes seen during dry conditions, on clear nights, and in areas with little or no known gas emissions. A particularly compelling account comes from the 1930s, when a team from Appalachian State University partnered with local authorities to stake out the ridge with advanced photographic equipment. One autumn night, 3 professors and their assistants reported seeing 2 red balls and 1 blue ball hovering 15 feet above the valley floor, moving in perfect silence. Their photos remain part of the university's paranormal research archive, and locals continue to cite this incident as proof of something beyond science. The presence of the lights has impacted the region's culture deeply. Tourists travel miles to the overlook points, where official signs mark spots as Best Brown Mountain Lights Viewing Area. Locals tell stories of past generations gathering on porches after supper, passing down tales of the night the lights came close, or the distant fire that wouldn't go out. County records hold dozens of complaints from frightened newcomers who believed the lights heralded impending disaster, or that the mountain itself was cursed. One of the most enduring folk explanations links the lights to the legend of a tragic love story. The ghost of a grieving mother searching for her lost child, whose lantern is said to still wander the ridges. Others claim Civil War soldiers' spirits, unable to find peace, create the fireballs as mournful signals. These stories are repeated around Appalachian campfires and church socials, adding to the sense of eerie pride and communal identity. Modern technology has not dispelled the mystery. Amateur and professional photographers have captured the lights in hundreds of images and videos, posted on forums and investigated by skeptics. Some footage shows faint, floating orbs. Other clips reveal intense glows that appear, shift, and vanish unpredictably. Even with modern cameras and sensors, no one has reliably recorded or explained the light's appearance and behavior. Many scientific teams return every few years, hoping for breakthroughs. In the 2010s, sophisticated atmospheric monitoring tools, infrared sensors, and seismic data loggers were deployed to Brown Mountain by researchers from North Carolina State University and Appalachian State University. These teams collected atmospheric gas samples, mapped electromagnetic fields, and tracked seismic events, discovering nothing that could definitively account for the lights. The Brown Mountain Lights remain one of America's most persistent, unexplained phenomena, according to their final report. Reddit threads are filled with first-person accounts from hikers and campers. One Redditor writes, "I didn't believe until I saw a swirling blue sphere rising from the river and floating overhead. It wasn't gas, it wasn't headlights. I was less than 50 yards away. After it passed, every animal sound stopped. My dog cowered and wouldn't move for 30 minutes. Whatever it is, it's not normal." Another post describes seeing 3 lights, 2 white, 1 blood red, that circled each other, then zipped into the woods, leaving an ozone smell behind. The Brown Mountain Lights have become part of regional identity. Each autumn, as the air cools and mist grows thick, families gather on the old logging roads to watch, hoping to spot the legendary phenomenon. It's not uncommon for locals to keep journals, marking the dates of particularly bright displays and sharing findings with neighbors. Some years pass with few sightings. Other years, the lights are seen weekly, always unannounced and always unexplained. Skeptics argue for human-made origins, suggesting distant highway or train lights refracted by unusual atmospheric conditions. Yet, government-commissioned studies in the 1970s and 2000s found that while man-made lights do occasionally influence what is seen, the Brown Mountain Lights often appear in complete absence of cars, trains, or artificial sources. Moreover, the variety in color, intensity, and movement disputes the simplistic explanation of passing headlights. A handful of locals claim far stranger experiences, sudden sensations of being watched, brief encounters with shadowy figures, and even missing time incidents while observing the lights. These claims have not been substantiated by official investigation, but they add deeply to the eerie aura surrounding Brown Mountain. Neither dismissed nor fully explained, the Brown Mountain Lights remain a cultural cornerstone. Local festivals celebrate the lights in music, art, and storytelling, attracting visitors from across the country. Scientists drop by with hope, and sometimes leave with more questions than they arrived with. Skeptics debate. Believers gather. Everyone watches. Ultimately, the Brown Mountain Light story is not just one of mysterious, glowing orbs. It is a saga of persistent human curiosity, genuine wonder, and the Appalachian Mountains' profound, unbroken connection to the unknown. These lights remind us that in a world increasingly dominated by certainty, some phenomena stubbornly refuse all explanation. The next time you stand atop Brown Mountain beneath a starry sky, know that you are not just watching odd flashes of luminescence. You are witnessing one of America's oldest, best documented, and most mystifying encounters with the unexplained. From Cherokee legend to modern scientific study, from local folk tales to national headlines, the Brown Mountain Lights continue to shine in the hearts and minds of those searching for answers within the ancient forests of Appalachia. Let's move to our 5th story, the legendary terror of the Wampus Cat, a shape-shifting entity that has stalked the borderlands and forests of the Cherokee territories straddling North Carolina and Tennessee for centuries. The Wampus Cat is neither myth nor mere campfire tale. Its story is rooted in Cherokee oral tradition, colonial-era reports, modern eyewitness testimony, and a string of unexplained livestock killings, mysterious disappearances, and midnight panic that continue into the present day. The tale of the Wampus Cat offers a glimpse into the deepest shadows of Appalachian fear. A perfect fusion of creature legend, cultural trauma, and ongoing mystery. Long before Europeans arrived, the mountains and hollers east of the Great Smoky Mountains were home to the Cherokee people. These were lands of high ridges, concealed springs, and thick old-growth forest, where every hollow and creek bore a name linked to a story from the tribe's distant past. Of all the creatures spoken about around the council fires, few engendered more caution than the Ua, the spirit of madness. A being so dreadful, its very name was whispered only in the safety of daylight, never at night. According to the most prevalent version of the Cherokee legend, the menace of the Wampus Cat began with a woman of extraordinary curiosity and courage. Her husband was a skilled hunter, called by the tribe's men each season to venture deep into the woods on ritual hunts. These hunts were said to reveal secrets, invoke old spirits, and, most sacred of all, required strict separation from women, lest they draw unwanted supernatural attention. Unable to repress her need for knowledge, the woman disguised herself in the pelt and mask of a mountain cat and followed the men one cold autumn night, hiding behind pine trunks and keeping to the shadows. At the heart of the forest, the men gathered and performed sacred rites. The woman, peering through her mask, watched as planes of light shimmered through the trees, the spirits of the wild summoned by the shaman's song. Suddenly, a gust of night wind howled through the council. The spirits sensed her presence. One ancient entity, the evil spirit Ua, turned, its gaze falling on the hidden figure. It cursed the woman for her trespass, condemning her to stalk the forests forever as a creature neither woman nor beast, a cursed hybrid doomed to eternal madness. Thus, the Wampus Cat was born, its fate sealed by curiosity and the raw power of Appalachia's supernatural world. Descriptions of the Wampus Cat have varied by generation and geography, but the core image is consistent. A cat-like creature the size of a mountain lion, with glowing yellow eyes and claws capable of ripping trees or lifting livestock. Its gait is disturbingly human, and its face, sometimes described as masked, sometimes as shifting between feline and human, terrorizes all who look upon it. Cherokee tales tell of the Wampus Cat stalking villages at night, its screams piercing the smoky moonlight, causing cattle to stampede and children to fall ill with fever and nightmares. Colonial journals from the 18th century contain the first written reports of similar creatures. Settlers described an animal leaving enormous tracks, capable of leaping impossible distances, accompanied by chilling cries. Not of any wolf, bear, or panther heard in nature. Recordings from the era's naturalists note unexplained livestock deaths, tales of horses shredded by claws too large for any known predator, and entire farms abandoned overnight after a string of disappearances. As time passed, stories of the Wampus Cat filtered into the wider Appalachian folklore. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, newspapers across North Carolina and Tennessee printed alarming reports of yellow-eyed devils prowling back roads and isolated farmsteads. Farmers detailed sightings of a giant cat, upright upon 2 feet, walking along the fence line, leaving bent barbed wire and shattered posts in its wake. Entire towns organized midnight watches and conducted spirit banishments, blending Christian prayer with Cherokee ritual in a desperate attempt to protect their homes. The 20th century brought new layers to the legend. In the 1960s and 1970s, local police reports cataloged instances of livestock mutilations, with corpses found drained of blood, claw marks on trees where no animal could reach. By then, the Wampus Cat story was being retold in schools and churches. Children were forbidden to wander out past dusk and warned to avoid the woods alone, especially during foggy nights when the Wampus walks. Oral historians recorded testimonies from elderly Cherokee who described seeing the creature on hunting trips, always just out of rifle range, lurking at the edge of vision, its eyes flickering like lanterns. In modern times, accounts persist, both from local residents and occasional outsiders. Reddit threads and local blogs contain dozens of contemporary sightings. Amblers on the Appalachian Trail catching glimpses of a yellow-eyed shadow keeping pace with their steps. Campers waking to find their tents slashed, no footprints except feline tracks nearby. Drivers along fog-bound highways reporting a massive cat moving upright by the roadside, then disappearing into the mist. These stories show a remarkable consistency in details, even across independent sources. One famous instance occurred in 2002, when a group of hikers in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park heard a series of blood-freezing screams. One hiker, Annie Paines, described seeing a huge dark shape, larger than any cougar, moving like a person with glaring fire eyes. Her group left the area by daylight, only to return later and find claw marks scored into a nearby pine, almost 7 feet above ground. Park rangers documented the incident, though no official explanation was ever issued. Another publicized case involved the destruction of several livestock in the quiet town of Robbinsville, North Carolina. In 2018, local authorities discovered sheep and goats slaughtered in ways no known mountain predator could manage. Security cameras picked up only fleeting glimpses, a distorted cat-like shadow standing upright before vanishing into the tree line. The case remains open. Skeptics propose various rational explanations for the terror. Some suggest escaped cougars, bobcats, or even rabid bears account for the sightings. Ranchers and Cherokee elders push back, noting that prints found at the scenes are consistently larger, and that no known feline, wild or domestic, walks upright with a human-like gait. Attempts to trap the Wampus cat have failed. Bait is destroyed, cameras malfunction, and no meaningful clues remain. On a deeper level, the Wampus cat has become a symbol in Cherokee cultural mythology, not merely a tale of fear, but an allegory of boundaries and transgression. It warns against trespassing on sacred ground, against seeking forbidden knowledge, and against disrespecting the spirits that haunt the ancient hills. In local storytelling events, the Wampus cat is almost always invoked to remind young listeners about humility, wisdom, and the importance of honoring tradition and nature. Every autumn, when the leaves turn, families gather to share tales of encounters, whether firsthand or inherited. Parents tell children, "If you see yellow eyes in the darkness and hear a woman scream, run." The Wampus cat is never far. Rituals persist, some mixed with Christianity, some purely traditional. A circle of salt around campfires, items of silver hidden near entrances, prayers at dusk. Scientific teams occasionally investigate, though the region's dense forests and rugged terrain defy easy exploration. In 2019, a collaborative study between regional universities and Cherokee cultural scholars collected 25 separate testimonies of Wampus cat sightings in a 12-month span, cross-referencing them against game camera footage and physical evidence. Most cases involved fleeting yet vivid encounters, and none could be fully explained by animal biology. The final report concluded, "The legend endures. The evidence remains inconclusive. The terror persists." Above all, the story of the Wampus cat endures because it is rooted in community experience. It is told and retold not as entertainment, but as a warning, a tradition binding generations together in shared memory and caution. The boundaries between belief and skepticism blur beneath the shadow of the Appalachians. Every sighting, every scream, every unexplained print becomes part of the living history of the mountains. To stand in the forests near the North Carolina-Tennessee border is to realize that the story isn't just about a creature. It's about the power of the land itself. The ancient intelligence woven into ridge and hollow, the spirits whispered about long before settlers arrived. In the heart of the night, when the woods rustle, generations of families hold their breath, listening for the scream that means the boundary has been crossed once more. So, if you ever find yourself wandering the twilight woods of Appalachia, heed the warnings, respect the night, and remember, when the cries of the wampus cat echo across the valleys and the yellow eyes appear between the trees, you are not merely hearing a legend. You are witnessing one of the oldest, most unsettling truths of the Appalachian Mountains, carved into memory by centuries of fear and awe. Let's move to our sixth story. The chilling modern account known by Appalachian hikers as the Appalachian Trail Stalker, a manifestation of raw human danger among myths, blending real horror with the legendary unease of the mountains. While many Appalachian ghost stories are set in the distant past, this one unfolds in recent years, pulling its details from Reddit threads, police reports, and first-hand survivor testimony. In the wild stretches of the world's longest hiking-only footpath, the boundaries between civilization and lawless wilderness blur. And sometimes, monsters are not supernatural, but terrifyingly real. The Appalachian Trail, often called the AT, runs for over 2,190 miles from Georgia to Maine, carving a narrow corridor of forests, ridges, and remote hollows through the heart of the eastern United States. It threads through 14 states, passes ancient towns and disappearing villages, and for much of its length is enveloped in a silence broken only by wind and birdsong. Each year, thousands of hikers attempt the trek, seeking adventure, healing, or escape. But buried beneath tales of supportive trail communities and photogenic vistas are accounts of what can go wrong when isolation breeds vulnerability, and the mountains themselves become stage and shield for evil. The story of the Appalachian Trail Stalker begins not with mystery, but with an alarming pattern noticed among experienced thru-hikers. As more hikers began chronically the journey online, in Instagram posts, neighborhood blogs, and particularly in long, urgent Reddit threads, certain warnings surfaced. Tucked between recommendations for gear and water sources were urgent recountings of strange encounters and flat-out threats. I was alone near the Smokies, about 2 days' hike out from the last shelter. At about 3 a.m, I woke up to someone whispering outside my tent. Not animals. A voice. It said, "You're going to get hurt out here. Better pack up and leave before it gets dark again." I froze, waited about 30 minutes, and then peeked out. No tracks, no one visible. But my trekking pole was gone, and around my tent the dirt was scuffed up like someone had circled me repeatedly. These unsettling incidents grew in frequency during the late 2010s and early 2020s. Stories began appearing on r/Appalachian Trail and related subreddits. A shadowy figure trailing solo hikers for miles, mirroring every pause at trail junctions. Distant, cold laughter echoing behind. Some hikers dismissed these as paranoia, the result of fatigue and sleep deprivation. Others were adamant. The threat was all too real. One account, widely circulated among hikers, involved a man from New England in the spring of 2019. He had been hiking 2 weeks with minimal human contact near the Tennessee-North Carolina border when, after dark, he heard movement just off the trail. It was subtle, crackling branches, soft footsteps. Each night at camp, the noises seemed closer. On the 4th night, after a restless sleep, he woke to find his food bag missing and what looked like boot prints weaving between the trees. "I followed the prints about 50 yards," he wrote on Reddit, "and then gave up because the woods were dense and I felt watched. That night, I didn't sleep. Something was out there making noises, moving in a way no animal could." More disturbing was what happened to Amy, a lone hiker from Virginia, recounted on both Reddit and local news forums. Several days into her journey through southern Virginia, she realized she was being trailed. Initially, she thought it was another solo hiker, so she stopped at a shelter to meet them. But when she arrived, she found the shelter empty, except for a set of deep gouges in a nearby log and a crude slingshot fashioned from branches. She pressed on, but at every turn, she felt eyes on her. Eventually, Amy posted a desperate plea. If you see a man in a brown jacket, hiking boots without laces, near mile marker 431, leave the trail. He isn't just creepy, he's dangerous. Other hikers responded to Amy's post with their own observations. Food going missing at campsites, tents slashed while they were on day hikes, and even a string of apparent injuries. One disturbing post described a survivor's account. I was on the trail near Roan Mountain. I stopped to make lunch and felt uneasy. Not animal uneasy, human uneasy. I bolted down the trail, feeling seen but not finding anyone. About a mile later, I slipped and rolled my ankle badly. As I lay there trying to get my bearings, I heard someone nearby through the brush. He didn't speak to me. He just stood about 10 yards away, half behind a tree, watching. When I screamed and threatened him with my hiking knife, he finally left. I crawled back to camp and called for help. Investigations were sporadic. Small local police forces, often unfamiliar with the intricacies of the AT, or with limited jurisdiction, sometimes responded. Rangers and state authorities would patrol after major incidents, especially when injuries or thefts were reported. But the vastness of the trail meant real intervention was rare. Survivors recounted frustration with how difficult it was for law enforcement to get involved and for viable leads to be pursued. One chilling aspect of the story is how often incidents happen in areas well away from major towns or trailheads. The Appalachian Trail runs through some of the most remote land in the East. Places where cell service disappears, ranger patrols are months apart, and a person could vanish without trace. Reddit users would share maps marking creepy zones, remote hollers in western North Carolina, long stretches through the Jefferson National Forest, and deep valleys in Pennsylvania where hikers are advised to travel only in pairs. The mythology around the Appalachian Trail Stalker grew, not because of solved cases, but because of failures to solve them. One infamous case from 2015 involved a hiker named Scott, who was found unconscious with a broken leg near a remote shelter in Virginia. His gear was strewn around the site, and it appeared he might have been attacked. Scott recounted later in a local paper, "I slipped, yeah. But what I remember before was someone standing on the ridge above me, just looking, no backpack, nothing. After my fall, nothing but silence, like the woods swallowed every trace of him." Some skeptics argue that most of these tales could be explained as misadventure, wild animal attacks, or the psychological effects of isolation. Fatigue, dehydration, and darkness can make long stretches of solitude seem more sinister, and even experienced hikers sometimes stumble, fall, and hallucinate. But the consistency of certain details, missing gear, human tracks, strange vocal warnings, suggests something more. At its core, the Appalachian Trail Stalker legend is a reckoning with deeper truths about the trail. The AT is a place of sublime beauty and profound isolation, but also of risk. Many sections are hours from help, and in certain stretches, danger takes on a distinctly human face. Some experienced hikers now advise carrying emergency devices, hiking in groups whenever possible, and reporting all suspicious encounters to authorities and to online trail forums. The community response has grown, forming informal watch groups and check-in stations at shelters, especially in the sections known for trouble. As modern technology has crept into even the remotest parts of the trail, some incidents have been caught on camera. Grainy footage of shadowy figures, blurred outlines appearing just at the edge of lantern glow. Hikers have posted voice recordings of late-night threats. "You should turn around now." Analysis of these clips has yet to identify any suspect. The Appalachian Trail Stalker legend resonates because it stands apart from the supernatural. It is, in its deepest sense, an Appalachian horror grounded in real possibility. It is a reminder that, in the wild places of the earth, sometimes the worst thing you can encounter is another person, unbound by law or community, whose motives remain dark and whose methods are as terrifying as the wild itself. Reddit's r/nosleep, r/appalachiantrail, and outdoor blogging sites continue to see new threads each year. Hikers reporting chilling moments alone in the woods, campers finding strange symbols carved into trees, isolated incidents of tents slashed and personal effects taken. The pattern is always the same: human malice shrouded in Appalachian shadow. Older locals have even added their own twists, tales of the Watcher, a spirit or possibly an old trapper who protects the trail by warning off those he finds too vulnerable. Some believe the Appalachian Trail Stalker is several different people separated by time and location. Others are convinced it's the same individual, moving up and down the ridges year after year. A few anthropologists studying trail culture suggest the stories function as cautionary tales, reinforcing the need for group travel, vigilance, and constant communication with the trail community. A cultural adaptation to the uncertainties of the long wilderness passage. Law enforcement periodically weighs in, sometimes debunking individual claims as hoaxes or encouraging hikers not to fuel hysteria. But in almost every confirmed case, the common thread is isolation exploited by the land itself and those who inhabit it. In the 2020s, a North Carolina sheriff told local media after a rash of missing equipment, "We do what we can to patrol, but the truth is, out there, you have to be your own first line of defense." Survivors, meanwhile, offer sobering advice. One veteran hiker recounted, "If someone unsettles you on the trail, trust your instincts. Take no chances. Move on, find a group, make noise. Don't worry about being rude." Others recommend sharing GPS locations with family, tagging locations on Instagram and Strava for trail records, and keeping pepper spray handy. In severe stretches, some hikers adhere to the buddy system despite their preference for solitude. And still, the allure of the AT remains, a place of pilgrimage, personal discovery, and healing. Each year, new hikers take their first steps, uncertain what awaits beyond the next bend. The real horror for many is not ghosts or urban legends, but the knowledge that evil sometimes walks the same path, hidden by forest and fog, protected by the vast and ancient embrace of the Appalachian wild. In truth, the story of the Appalachian Trail Stalker is the story of our deepest vulnerabilities, the shadow side of adventure, and the price we sometimes pay for longing to be alone with nature. The tale is not told to deter hiking, but to respect the land and the mysteries it keeps, and to remind every wanderer that sometimes darkness on the path is both literal and figurative. So if you ever hike deep into the Appalachian Mountains, keep your wits sharpened, your instincts tuned, and remember, the legends of the trail are written not just in old books, but in recent memory, in whispered warnings, missing gear, and the eyes in the woods where no animal would dare linger long. The real Appalachian horror is not always a ghost or beast. Sometimes it is the stranger you never see, whose presence you only sense as the trees close in and the silence grows impossibly deep. Let's move to our seventh story, the haunting legend of the Moon-Eyed People. Beings described by both Cherokee oral tradition and European settler records as pale, short, and inexplicably sensitive to daylight. This unsettling Appalachian mystery blurs the lines between cultural memory, archaeological discovery, and the unknown. Unlike other cryptid stories, where monsters are glimpsed fleetingly, this tale is supported by centuries of chronicles, folklore, and hard physical evidence uncovered in the woods of northern Georgia and across the southern Appalachians. The earliest encounters with the Moon-Eyed People date back to the pre-colonial era, when the Cherokee migrated into the southern highlands in the centuries before European contact. According to tradition, when the Cherokee arrived, they found large areas already occupied by a mysterious race of pale-skinned dwarfs with wide, round eyes, who could only move freely at night. The light of day left them nearly blind and helpless. The very name moon-eyed comes from this physiological trait. Their eyes, adapted to darkness, would shine or reflect with an unnatural gleam in moonlight. Some versions of the legend claim the Moon-Eyed People built sophisticated stone structures, walls, mounds, and forts deep in the forest, hiding from sunlight and outsiders alike. They communicated in chattering, high-pitched voices and fled the sun as if it burned. Cherokee oral history, preserved in stories recounted by elders and recorded by scholars like James Mooney, tells of a climactic battle. As the nights grew shorter and summers longer, the Moon-Eyed People's territory shrank and their survival became precarious. The Cherokee, who mostly opposed their presence, finally overcame them in a decisive confrontation, driving them either west or underground, or, as some stories claim, causing the mysterious beings to vanish entirely. What makes this story especially intriguing is the overlap with European settler accounts and the archaeological record. When white colonists pushed into the northern Georgia mountains in the 1700s, they were startled to find elaborate stone ruins, often in locations associated with Moon-Eyed People legends. The most famous are the walls at Fort Mountain, a sprawling, serpentine structure of rocks stretching 885 feet across a ridgetop. Local guides and Cherokee informants alike claimed these works were not of Cherokee origin, but built by the Moon-Eyed People in the old times. Early historians such as Benjamin Smith Barton and Lyman Draper cataloged stories from both Cherokee and Muskogee Creek elders, who agreed there had been an ancient people, light-skinned, weak-eyed, and nocturnal, whose constructions predated their arrival. These accounts sometimes describe the Moon-Eyed People as too small in stature for any European race, ruling out both contemporary colonial populations and local tribes. The 1790s brought new accounts. In his Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee, author John Haywood recorded the presence of strange stone forts across the Appalachians, ascribed by local traditions to moon-eyed men. Settlers found not only walls, but pottery fragments, tools for working stone, and signs of dwellings, though smaller and with lower ceilings than their own log houses. Some researchers have speculated about the possible origin of the Moon-Eyed People. The most prominent natural theory is that they may have been remnants of an early or lost migration group, possibly Europeans, perhaps Norse or Welsh explorers, who reached the continent well before Columbus. The Welsh Madoc legend, which claims a 12th century prince sailed to America, sometimes gets tied into these stories. Welsh stones and fortresses bear superficial resemblance to the Appalachian ruins, and some accounts even describe Moon-Eyed People as speaking in rhythms reminiscent of Welsh. Others argue for an entirely different explanation, that the Moon-Eyed People were a distinct indigenous tribe, either albino or suffering from a genetic condition like the rare ocular albinism. Their nocturnal lifestyle could have stemmed from medical necessity, and their downfall was simply a case of evolutionary disadvantage when the environment shifted. Archaeologically, the physical evidence remains compelling, though frustratingly incomplete. The Fort Mountain walls lack definitive dating, but they predate known European construction and do not match Cherokee methods. A 2012 survey by local archaeologists identified layers of charcoal and pottery, but nothing conclusive about the builders. Recent LiDAR scans of the region have revealed scattered stonework buried beneath centuries of forest, suggesting a once larger network of structures. Pottery shards have been found with unfamiliar designs, bearing no clear resemblance to historic Cherokee or Muskogee styles. Folklore only deepens the mystery. Even as late as the 1800s, settlers in North Carolina and Georgia reported encountering pale, reclusive mountain folk, often in small family groups, living in cave systems or abandoned stone huts. These moon-eyed squatters, as they were called in the Carolina Gazette, would barter goods but flee when the sun rose, sometimes abandoning entire farms at the threat of violence or exposure. The stories persisted into the 20th century, appearing in local newspapers and ghost tales. Children were warned that moon-eyed creatures slipped through the woods at night, and travelers recounted strange encounters while camping by remote springs. Some spoke of luminous eyes reflecting firelight, and of tiny feet moving silently over moss and rock. One widely retold story involves a pair of treasure hunters near the Georgia border who stumbled into a hidden cave system and found crude sketches of short, round-headed figures etched into the stone. They reported, "When we shined our lanterns, the cavern seemed to reflect multiple shining eyes. We felt surrounded, but heard nothing but our own breaths." Modern blogs and Reddit threads continue the tradition. Trail hikers have shared accounts of strange shapes flitting behind trees on moonless nights. Clusters of what appear to be children's footprints leading to nowhere, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched by something barely human. One viral post in 2018 described an encounter near Fort Mountain. "Saw something pale duck behind a rock just out of the beam of my headlamp. Small, wide-eyed, almost like a child. But there was something wrong about the way it moved." Skeptics assert the moon-eyed people myth is born of misidentification, albino animals, reclusive outcasts, or simple imagination. Others suggest that stories about lost Welsh settlers were invented long after the stonework was built, in order to provide a romantic or heroic explanation. Yet, the convergence of native tradition, settler record, and material evidence cannot be easily dismissed. The moon-eyed people tale is woven deeply into Cherokee cultural memory. They appear in ceremonial stories told during the solstice or harvest festivals, always as a warning. Beware the ones whose eyes see too much at night. Daylight brings truth, but the moon is for those who must hide. Some anthropologists believe the legend serves a social purpose, explaining the origins of mysterious ruins and teaching the value of vigilance. Even now, local elders quietly mark places as haunted, attributing strange animal deaths, lost pets, or odd echoes to the moon-eyed folk. Some will not walk certain trails at night, declaring them unsafe after sundown. Archaeologists still investigate new findings, with state-funded digs occasionally uncovering pottery, bone tools, and stonework that remains ambiguous in origin. With every new discovery or retelling, interest in the moon-eyed people grows. Festival reenactments, tourist guides, and cryptid documentaries keep the story alive in popular culture, and internet forums buzz with speculation about the true identity of these nocturnal beings. Skeptics and believers debate. Were the moon-eyed people truly lost explorers? A forgotten indigenous population? Or simply the product of generations of fear and loneliness in the deep Appalachian woods? Regardless of their origins, the moon-eyed people remain an enduring symbol of Appalachia's hidden mysteries. In the northern Georgia forests, as the moon rises over Fort Mountain and the stone walls capture both history and moonlight, the old legend comes alive, reminding travelers that not all secrets of the mountains can be solved, and that sometimes the things watching us from the dark are as old as the hills themselves. Whether you side with historical evidence, native lore, or wild speculation, the story of the moon-eyed people illustrates how deeply mystery runs through the Appalachian Mountains, and how the search for answers continues under the silent, watchful gaze of moonlit night. Let's move to our 8th story, the horrifying encounter with the Flatwoods Monster, also known as the Braxton County Monster, which terrorized a small West Virginia community on the evening of September 12, 1952. This is not a faded legend from centuries past, but a meticulously documented incident involving multiple witnesses, law enforcement investigations, military inquiries, and national media coverage. The Flatwoods Monster case represents one of the most compelling and disturbing encounters with the unknown in Appalachian history. A story that transformed a quiet rural community into ground zero for one of America's most famous cryptid sightings. The terror began at approximately 7:15 p.m. on that fateful September evening in the small town of Flatwoods, nestled deep in the mountains of Braxton County, West Virginia. A group of local boys, Edward May, aged 13, Freddie May, aged 14, Tommy Heyer, aged 10, and Neil Nunley, aged 14, were engaged in an innocent game of football on the lawn of Flatwoods Elementary School, when their attention was suddenly drawn skyward by a brilliant streak of light. The object, described as a fiery red orb or meteor-like phenomenon, blazed across the darkening sky before appearing to crash into a hillside on G. Bailey Fisher's farm, just beyond the ridge from where the boys stood watching. Filled with curiosity and perhaps hoping they had witnessed an airplane crash, the boys raced to the home of Kathleen May, a local beautician and mother of Edward and Freddie. Mrs. May, displaying remarkable courage and maternal concern, decided to accompany the children to investigate what they had seen. The group was joined by Eugene Gene Lemon, a 17-year-old member of the West Virginia National Guard, who brought along a flashlight. Also joining the expedition were additional local children Ronnie Shaver, aged 10, and Tommy Heyer, along with the family dog named Richie. As the group of 7 made their way up the steep, wooded hillside toward the presumed crash site, an overwhelming sense of dread began to settle upon them. The air grew thick with a pungent, metallic odor that burned their eyes and throats, a smell described by witnesses as resembling sulfur or rotten eggs, though with an unmistakably industrial quality. Some members of the group immediately began experiencing nausea and throat irritation, symptoms that would persist for days following the encounter. Upon reaching the crest of the hill, the group spotted a pulsating red light in the distance, confirming that something had indeed landed or crashed in the area. As they cautiously approached, Gene Lemon swept his flashlight beam across the darkness, searching for the source of the eerie glow. Suddenly, from their left, 2 brilliant beams of light pierced the darkness like enormous eyes. When Lemon directed his flashlight toward these lights, the beam revealed something that would haunt the witnesses for the rest of their lives. There, hovering, approximately 10 to 12 feet above the ground, was a massive, otherworldly creature unlike anything any of them had ever seen. The entity stood roughly 10 feet tall and 4 feet wide, with a body that appeared to be dark, metallic green or black in color. Most terrifying of all was its head, which witnesses unanimously described as being shaped like the ace of spades, pointed at the top with a broader base and glowing with an eerie red or orange luminescence. The creature's eyes burned with an intense greenish-orange light that seemed to emit their own illumination. The monster's body was described as being covered in what appeared to be a dark, metallic dress or shroud that hung in pleated folds below its waist, giving it an almost ceremonial or otherworldly appearance. Some witnesses reported seeing small, claw-like appendages extending from its sides, though accounts varied on whether these were arms or some other type of appendage. Most disturbing of all, the creature appeared to be levitating or floating rather than standing on solid ground, adding to its supernatural and threatening presence. As the group stood frozen in terror, the Flatwoods monster began to emit a sharp, hissing sound, described by some as mechanical, by others as almost serpentine. Without warning, the creature began to glide directly toward the witnesses, its movements smooth and unnatural. At this point, Gene Lemon let out a terrified scream and dropped his flashlight, plunging the area into darkness save for the creature's glowing eyes. The entire group turned and fled down the hillside in absolute panic, running as fast as their legs could carry them back toward the safety of town. The immediate aftermath of the encounter was almost as disturbing as the sighting itself. Several members of the group, including Mrs. May and some of the children, experienced severe nausea, vomiting, and throat irritation that lasted for several days. These symptoms were initially dismissed by authorities as psychological effects of hysteria and fear. But medical experts have since noted that the described symptoms are also consistent with exposure to mustard gas or other toxic chemical agents. Word of the encounter spread rapidly throughout the small community and beyond. Mrs. May and Gene Lemon reported the incident to local authorities that same evening, sparking an immediate investigation. The Braxton County Sheriff and his deputy, who had coincidentally been in the area investigating reports of a crashed aircraft, searched the hilltop that night, but reported finding nothing unusual. No evidence of a crash, no traces of the creature, and none of the lingering odor described by the witnesses. However, the following day brought new developments. Lee Stewart Jr. from the local Braxton Democrat newspaper conducted his own investigation of the site and claimed to have discovered skid marks in the field where the object had allegedly landed, along with an odd, gummy deposit that he attributed to evidence of a saucer landing. These physical traces, though never scientifically analyzed, added credibility to the witnesses' accounts and fueled growing speculation about what had really occurred on Fisher's farm. The story quickly escalated beyond local interest. Within days, the incident was making national headlines across the United States. Newspaper reports appeared in major publications from coast to coast. Radio broadcasts carried the story on large networks, and the Braxton County Sheriff's Office was inundated with hundreds of phone calls from curiosity seekers and reporters. The National Press Services ranked the Flatwoods monster story as the number 11 story of the year for 1952. The attention attracted investigators from various fields. Gray Barker, a prominent UFO researcher and writer, arrived in Flatwoods within days of the incident to conduct tape-recorded interviews with all the witnesses. His account, published in Fate magazine, became the definitive early documentation of the encounter and helped establish many of the details that remain consistent in retellings today. Even T. Sanderson, another respected Fortean investigator, also came to study the case, lending additional credibility to the witnesses' claims. Even more significantly, the incident attracted the attention of the United States Air Force, which was actively investigating UFO sightings across the country as part of Project Blue Book. Military investigators concluded that the witnesses had likely seen a meteor, followed by a barn owl perched in a tree, with shadows and heightened anxiety creating the illusion of a larger, more threatening creature. However, this official explanation failed to account for many of the specific details reported by witnesses, including the creature's apparent size, its floating movement, and the toxic effects experienced by multiple individuals. The Flatwoods Monster incident was not an isolated occurrence in the region during this period. Mrs. Audra Harper reported a similar sighting near the town of Heaters, approximately 5 miles north of Flatwoods, shortly before the main incident. Harper claimed to have seen a tall, dark figure with glowing eyes while walking through the woods with a friend. Additionally, on September 13th, just one day after the Flatwoods encounter, George and Edith Snitowski reported their own terrifying experience near Strange Creek, about 20 miles south of Flatwoods. The couple claimed their car died unexpectedly, and they witnessed a 10-foot-tall creature with a reptilian head that dragged its clawed hand across their car hood before disappearing into the woods. Over the decades since 1952, skeptics have proposed various rational explanations for the Flatwoods Monster encounter. Joe Nickel of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry conducted an extensive investigation in 2000 and concluded that the witnesses likely saw a meteor, which was indeed observed across 3 states that night, followed by a barn owl perched in a tree. According to this theory, the owl's silhouette, combined with shadows from tree branches and the witness's heightened state of fear, created the illusion of a much larger, more threatening creature. The toxic symptoms, Nichols suggests, were simply the result of hysteria and overexertion. However, this skeptical explanation has failed to satisfy many researchers and local residents. The consistency of witness testimony, the specific details provided by multiple independent observers, and the physical evidence reported at the scene continue to challenge conventional explanations. Moreover, the Flatwoods incident fits into a broader pattern of similar encounters throughout West Virginia during the 1950s, suggesting either a coordinated hoax, which seems unlikely given the scattered locations and independent witnesses, or genuine, unexplained phenomena. The cultural impact of the Flatwoods Monster has been profound and enduring. The creature has become an integral part of West Virginia folklore and Appalachian legend, inspiring countless books, documentaries, television shows, and even video games. The town of Flatwoods erected a welcome sign designating it as the home of the Green Monster, and the Flatwoods Monster Museum in nearby Sutton draws thousands of visitors annually. The Braxton County Convention and Visitors Bureau has built 5 giant chairs shaped like the monster throughout the county, creating a tourist trail for cryptid enthusiasts. The legend has also permeated popular culture far beyond West Virginia. References to the Flatwoods Monster appear in video games such as Fallout 76 and Everybody's Golf 4, while the History Channel's series Project Blue Book dedicated an entire episode to the incident. Since 2019, Flatwoods has hosted an annual Flatwoods Monster Convention, cementing the creature's place in contemporary American folklore. What makes the Flatwoods Monster case particularly compelling is its documentation and the credibility of its witnesses. Unlike many cryptid sightings that rely on single, anonymous accounts, this incident involved multiple named witnesses, including a National Guardsman and a respected community member, all of whom maintained their stories despite decades of scrutiny and skepticism. The physical evidence, though limited, was documented by local newspapers and investigators, and the broader context of similar sightings throughout the region during the same period adds additional weight to the witnesses' claims. The Flatwoods Monster represents more than just another cryptid sighting. It embodies the intersection of Cold War anxiety, rural isolation, and the eternal human fear of the unknown that permeates Appalachian culture. Whether the witnesses encountered an extraterrestrial visitor, a misidentified animal, or something else entirely, their experience reflects the enduring power of the mountains to harbor mysteries that challenge our understanding of reality itself. As night falls over the hills of Braxton County and mist rises from the hollows where the Flatwoods monster was first seen, locals still speak in hushed tones about that September evening in 1952. The creature may never have been seen again, but its legacy lives on, a testament to the enduring mysteries that lurk in the shadows of the Appalachian Mountains, waiting to challenge everything we think we know about the world around us. Let's move to our 9th story. The haunting phenomenon known as the Phantom Hiker, a mysterious figure that has been encountered by countless hikers throughout various sections of the Appalachian Trail for decades. Unlike other Appalachian legends rooted in ancient Cherokee lore or colonial-era encounters, the Phantom Hiker represents a modern mystery, a ghostly figure whose appearances are documented in hiking forums, Reddit threads, trail journals, and personal testimonies from experienced outdoorsmen who stake their reputations on what they witnessed in the misty hollows and rocky ridges of America's most famous hiking trail. The Phantom Hiker is not confined to a single location or mountain, making this phenomenon uniquely unsettling. Reports span from Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina to the remote stretches near Pierce Pond in Maine, from the fog-shrouded ridges of Pennsylvania to the ancient forests of Virginia. What connects these diverse sightings is the remarkable consistency of witness descriptions. A solitary figure, usually male, dressed in outdated hiking gear, who appears suddenly on the trail, walks with purpose and unusual speed, ignores all attempts at communication, and then vanishes without explanation. The most documented encounters occur near Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina, where the Phantom Hiker has become something of a local legend among the hiking community. Witnesses describe him as an older man with a rugged, weathered appearance and a full beard, dressed in what appears to be clothing from the mid-20th century. He carries a canvas army backpack and a long walking stick, gear that seems anachronistic compared to modern lightweight hiking equipment. Most significantly, he appears primarily during the evening hours when daylight is fading and most day hikers are heading back to their vehicles. One of the most compelling accounts from Grandfather Mountain comes from a group of 3 hikers who encountered the Phantom during a late afternoon trek in the backcountry. As they rested and shared granola bars, one hiker mentioned they were in an area where the Phantom Hiker had been reported, prompting discussion of the legend. Later, as they navigated a difficult rocky stretch on their return to the parking area, they encountered a tall, gruff-looking man with a craggy face and beard, wearing old-fashioned clothing and carrying a rough pack on his back. The figure passed them without acknowledging their greetings, hiking at an impossible pace toward the bottom of the mountain. When the group turned around just seconds later to point him out, the man had completely vanished from the bare, rocky hilltop, where there was nowhere to hide. A ranger later confirmed that no one matching that description had been found during his sweep of the mountain. The Pierce Pond area of Maine has generated equally disturbing accounts of phantom encounters. One solo hiker reported seeing a ghostly figure with the appearance of a woodsy outdoorsman type, carrying what appeared to be fishing gear near his campsite. The spectral figure appeared on 2 consecutive nights, first fading into darkness after being spotted, then on the second night, stopping to stare directly at the terrified camper before the hiker fled into the forest and hid behind a tree until morning. The witness hastily broke camp and left the area before nightfall the following day. Perhaps the most unsettling encounter occurred in May 1972, when a solo hiker experienced what can only be described as a temporal anomaly. While walking through a section of the Appalachian Trail, the hiker suddenly found himself surrounded by an unusually thick ground fog. Through the mist emerged a large figure wearing a heavy coat and wide-brimmed hat, walking with a staggered gait while staring at the ground, as if searching for something lost. As the phantom approached, the living hiker moved aside to avoid collision. But when they came close enough for eye contact, the witness was shocked by the apparition's cloudy blue eyes that seemed to stare straight through him. The figure's clothing appeared to be from a different historical period entirely, and when the hiker attempted to speak, the phantom showed no response or acknowledgement. After passing by, the hiker turned to look back and discovered the figure had completely vanished. Modern technology and social media have brought new dimensions to phantom hiker encounters. Reddit users on r/Appalachian Trail regularly share their own experiences, often describing similar details despite being separated by years and hundreds of miles. One particularly detailed account describes a hiker noticing a man ahead on the trail wearing an old-school giant-framed pack and short 70s-style gym shorts. When the witness approached the location where the figure had been standing, the area was completely empty despite clear sight lines through thin, sparse trees. The poster noted that locals later told him stories about a ghost in that particular area, though he couldn't determine if they were simply trying to scare him after learning of his encounter. The psychological impact of these encounters extends beyond simple fear or curiosity. Many witnesses report lasting unease and a fundamental shift in their perception of the wilderness. The consistency of reports across different states, decades, and independent witnesses suggests something more significant than mere imagination or misidentification. Trail veterans who have spent countless nights in remote locations often become believers after their first phantom hiker encounter, abandoning their skepticism in favor of healthy respect for the unexplained. What makes the phantom hiker phenomenon particularly compelling is its integration with established hiking culture and trail communities. Shelter registers, the logbooks maintained at Appalachian Trail shelters, occasionally contain cryptic entries that some believe are left by the phantom himself. These entries, written in old-fashioned handwriting, often contain references to trail conditions or landmarks that predate the modern trail system. Park rangers and trail maintainers, while typically reluctant to discuss supernatural encounters officially, privately acknowledge the pattern of reports and advise hikers to trust their instincts if they feel uncomfortable during encounters with other trail users. The phantom hiker legend has evolved to encompass multiple theories about the entity's origin and purpose. Some believe he represents the spirit of a dedicated hiker who died on the trail and chose to continue his eternal journey through the mountains he loved. Others suggest he may be the ghost of an early trail pioneer, perhaps someone involved in the original construction or mapping of the Appalachian Trail system. More ominous theories propose that he serves as a harbinger or warning, appearing before accidents or dangerous weather conditions threaten other hikers. Scientific skeptics attempt to explain the phenomenon through various rational means. Fatigue-induced hallucinations, misidentification of other hikers in poor lighting conditions, or the psychological effects of isolation and suggestion. However, these explanations struggle to account for the specific details consistently reported across different encounters. The daylight sightings in clear conditions, and the immediate vanishing that multiple witnesses have documented. The cultural significance of the phantom hiker extends beyond simple ghost stories into the realm of trail folklore and hiking tradition. Experienced thru-hikers often share phantom encounters as part of initiation rituals for newcomers. But the reverent tone of these tellings suggests genuine belief rather than mere entertainment. The phenomenon has become woven into the social fabric of long-distance hiking culture, serving as both warning and wonder. A reminder that the wilderness holds mysteries that transcend our understanding. Trail journals and hiking blogs contain hundreds of references to the phantom hiker, often mentioned in passing as if his existence is an accepted part of trail reality. Some hikers actively seek encounters with the mysterious figure, camping in known sighting areas or hiking during the preferred twilight hours when he's most commonly seen. However, the phantom appears to maintain his own agenda, showing himself to unsuspecting witnesses while eluding those who actively pursue him. The phenomenon raises profound questions about the nature of the Appalachian Trail itself and its relationship with those who traverse its length. As America's longest hiking-only footpath, the trail represents more than mere recreation. It serves as a pilgrimage route, a means of spiritual connection with the natural world, and a test of human endurance and determination. In this context, the phantom hiker may represent the culmination of that spiritual journey, a guardian spirit of the trail who embodies the eternal quest for connection with the wilderness. Environmental factors may contribute to the frequency and intensity of phantom hiker encounters. The Appalachian Mountains are among the oldest on Earth. Their ancient ridges and hidden valleys steeped in geological and cultural history that spans millennia. The combination of elevation changes, weather patterns, and natural electromagnetic fields may create conditions conducive to paranormal phenomena or heightened perception. The isolation and sensory deprivation experienced by long-distance hikers might also enhance their sensitivity to subtle environmental cues or spiritual presences. Modern documentation efforts have attempted to map phantom hiker sightings, identifying potential patterns in location, timing, and environmental conditions. These studies reveal clustering around certain trail sections, particularly in areas with historical significance or where fatal accidents have occurred. However, the data remains incomplete due to underreporting. Many witnesses choose not to share their experiences publicly, fearing ridicule or disbelief from the hiking community. The legend continues to evolve with each new generation of hikers who encounter the mysterious figure. Social media platforms provide new venues for sharing experiences and comparing details. While GPS technology allows for precise location documentation that was impossible in earlier decades. Yet despite technological advances, the phantom hiker maintains his mystery, appearing and vanishing according to his own inexplicable schedule. For those who hike the Appalachian Trail, the phantom hiker represents both the ultimate trail companion and the embodiment of the wilderness's essential mystery. He reminds us that despite our maps, GPS devices, and weather forecasts, the mountains retain secrets that cannot be cataloged or explained. In the gathering dusk, when shadows stretch long across ancient ridges and mist rises from hidden valleys, the phantom hiker continues his eternal journey, a guardian of the trail's deepest mysteries, and a reminder that some questions are more important than their answers. Whether you encounter him yourself or simply hear his story whispered around shelter campfires, the phantom hiker remains one of the Appalachian Trail's most enduring and unsettling legends. Proof that even in our modern, connected world, the wilderness still holds the power to humble us with wonder and fear. Let's move to our 10th story. The ancient terror known as the Dragon of the Lower Mahantango, a serpentine demon that haunted the fertile valleys along Pennsylvania's Susquehanna River long before European settlers ever set foot in the New World. This creature represents one of the oldest and most deeply rooted legends in Pennsylvania folklore, a story that bridges Native American oral tradition, colonial-era accounts, and modern encounters that continue to perplex investigators and local residents alike. The Lower Mahantango region, encompassing the watersheds of Mahantango Creek and its tributaries in what is now Snyder and Northumberland counties, Pennsylvania, was once considered sacred ground by the Lenape, Delaware people. The very name Mahantongo derives from the Delaware word Mahantongo, meaning where we had plenty to eat, a testament to the region's abundant wildlife, fertile soil, and crystal-clear streams that provided sustenance for generations. Yet beneath this pastoral abundance lurked something far more sinister. A creature so terrible that it would become embedded in the collective memory of multiple Native American tribes and eventually find its way into the darkest corners of Pennsylvania mountain folklore. According to the most ancient versions of the legend, preserved in Delaware oral tradition and later recorded by early ethnographers, the dragon of the lower Mahantongo was no ordinary serpent. Described as a massive, elongated creature with scales that shimmered like black water in moonlight, it possessed supernatural powers that allowed it to control the weather, poison waterways, and bring disease to any who dared settle too close to its domain. The creature was said to be as long as 10 canoes placed end to end, with eyes that glowed like embers and breath that could wither crops and sicken livestock from great distances. The dragon's presence was first documented in the rich vales bordering the Susquehanna River, where Native American communities had thrived for centuries. These settlements, strategically located along fertile floodplains and near abundant fishing grounds, represented some of the most prosperous indigenous communities in the region. Yet according to tribal accounts, this prosperity came at a terrible price. The constant threat of the great serpent that persisted in annoying the good Indians who resided in the rich vales. The creature's method of terrorizing local populations was as insidious as it was effective. Rather than launching direct attacks, the dragon employed psychological warfare and environmental manipulation. Witnesses described how the beast would emerge from deep pools in Mahantongo Creek during the darkest nights, its massive coils creating ripples that could be heard from miles away. The creature would then release a toxic miasma that would drift across sleeping villages, causing nightmares, fever, and unexplained illnesses that could last for weeks. One of the most detailed accounts of the dragon's activities comes from Chief Tammany's nephew, whose story was preserved by early Moravian missionaries. According to this testimony, the dragon possessed the ability to assume different forms, sometimes appearing as a massive water snake, other times manifesting as a dragon-like creature with rudimentary wings formed from extended ribs and membrane. Similar to the anatomical adaptations observed in other cryptid encounters throughout Appalachia, this shape-shifting ability made the creature nearly impossible to track or confront directly, as hunters never knew whether they were pursuing a terrestrial or aquatic entity. The psychological impact on Native American communities was profound and lasting. Entire villages would relocate when the dragon's presence became too oppressive, abandoning prime agricultural land and established trade routes rather than continue living under the creature's shadow. Shamans and medicine men attempted various rituals to drive away the beast, but these efforts seemed only to anger it further, resulting in more frequent and violent manifestations. When European settlers began arriving in the Mahantongo Valley during the early 18th century, they initially dismissed Native American warnings about the dragon as primitive superstition. However, their skepticism quickly evaporated as they began experiencing unexplained phenomena that matched the descriptions provided by indigenous elders. Johann Conrad Weiser, the famous Indian interpreter and one of the first Europeans to establish permanent residence in the region, documented several encounters in his personal journals describing a great serpent of unusual size and malevolent disposition that seemed to take particular pleasure in terrorizing newcomers to the valley. The dragon's activities escalated during the tumultuous period leading up to the Penns Creek Massacre of 1755. Historical accounts suggest that the creature's increasingly aggressive behavior may have been connected to the growing tensions between Native American tribes and European settlers. In the months preceding the massacre, numerous settlers reported seeing a massive serpentine shape moving through the waters of Mahantango Creek, accompanied by an overwhelming stench of decay and sulfur that would linger for days after each sighting. One particularly chilling account from this period involves the Ziegler family, German immigrants who had established a small farm along the creek's north branch. According to surviving family letters, the Zieglers began experiencing nightly visitations from something they described as der große Schlange, the great snake. The creature would approach their cabin after midnight, its massive body creating deep furrows in the soft earth around their property. The family's livestock would become violently ill after these visits, and their well water would turn brackish and undrinkable for weeks at a time. The situation reached a breaking point when the Zieglers' youngest daughter, Anna, claimed to have seen the dragon in its full glory during a moonlit night in August 1755. According to her testimony, recorded years later by a Lutheran minister, the creature reared up from Mahantango Creek to a height taller than the surrounding trees, its scales reflecting moonlight like armor, and its eyes burning with an unholy fire. The encounter left Anna in a state of shock that persisted for months, and she would never again venture near any body of water after dark. The dragon's reign of terror reached its climax during the autumn of 1755, coinciding with a period of maximum tension between settlers and Native Americans. Multiple sources describe a series of catastrophic events that locals attributed to the creature's wrath. Wells throughout the valley became contaminated with a foul-smelling substance. Crops withered despite favorable weather conditions, and livestock began dying from mysterious ailments that local veterinarians could not explain or treat. The Penns Creek Massacre, which occurred on October 16, 1755, marked a turning point in the dragon legend. According to some accounts, the creature was seen the night before the attack, its massive form moving along the creek like a harbinger of doom. Whether this was mere coincidence or something more supernatural remains a matter of debate, but the timing was certainly ominous. The massacre resulted in 14 deaths and 11 captives, fundamentally altering the demographics and psychology of the entire region. Following the massacre and the subsequent depopulation of many settlements, sightings of the dragon of the lower Mahantango became less frequent, but no less terrifying. The creature seemed to retreat deeper into the wilderness, emerging only occasionally to remind locals of its continued presence. Pennsylvania German settlers who gradually repopulated the region brought their own traditions of dragon lore, which merged with existing Native American legends to create an even more complex and frightening mythology. By the early 19th century, the dragon had become integrated into local folklore as a permanent, if dormant, threat. Children were warned never to swim alone in Mahantango Creek, and hunting parties would carry silver bullets specifically for protection against the creature. Local Lutheran and Reformed churches incorporated prayers for protection from the ancient serpent of the valley into their regular services, treating the dragon's existence as accepted fact rather than mere superstition. The industrial development of the 19th century brought new encounters with the dragon. Pennsylvania railroad workers constructing lines through the Mahantango Valley reported numerous unexplained incidents. Tools would disappear overnight. Sections of freshly laid track would be found mysteriously warped or displaced, and work crews would occasionally discover massive snake-like impressions in soft earth that were far too large to have been made by any known species. One particularly well-documented incident occurred in 1847, when a railroad construction crew working near the creek's confluence with the Susquehanna discovered what appeared to be a series of underground chambers connected by tunnels large enough for a grown man to walk through. The chambers contained strange deposits of sulfur and what appeared to be shed snake scales of enormous size. When company officials ordered the chambers sealed with dynamite, workers reported hearing roars of rage emanating from deep underground that continued for several hours after the explosions. The dragon legend persisted well into the 20th century, with sporadic sightings continuing to be reported by hunters, fishermen, and hikers throughout the region. Modern accounts describe a creature that has perhaps grown more reclusive, but no less formidable. Pennsylvania Game Commission records from the 1950s and 1960s contain several reports of unusually large snake-like animals observed in the Mothman watershed, though officials consistently attributed these sightings to misidentified timber rattlesnakes or released pet pythons. Contemporary encounters with the dragon of the lower Mothman often involve environmental anomalies that echo the historical accounts. Hikers report suddenly encountering areas where the air becomes thick and difficult to breathe, often accompanied by a strong sulfurous odor that seems to have no identifiable source. Local trout streams, which normally maintain consistent temperatures, occasionally experience sudden warming that kills fish in large numbers. Events that state environmental officials have never been able to adequately explain. Modern cryptozoologists and paranormal investigators who have studied the dragon legend point to several factors that lend credibility to the accounts. The consistency of descriptions across different time periods and cultural groups, the specific geographical focus of the sightings, and the detailed environmental effects described by witnesses all suggest something more than mere folklore or mass hysteria. The dragon of the lower Mothman represents something deeper than a simple monster story. It embodies the complex relationship between human settlement and the wild, untamed forces of the natural world. In a region where Native American spirituality, European folk traditions, and frontier pragmatism converged, the dragon legend serves as a powerful reminder that some aspects of the natural world remain beyond human understanding or control. Today, as development continues to encroach upon the Mothman watershed and climate change alters the region's ecological balance, some locals wonder whether disturbing the dragon's ancient domain might awaken forces that have slumbered for generations. Whether the dragon of the lower Mothman represents a physical creature, a spiritual entity, or something else entirely, its legend continues to serve as a cautionary tale about the consequences of ignoring the deeper mysteries that lie beneath Pennsylvania's deceptively peaceful mountain landscapes. For those brave enough to explore the valleys where Mothman Creek winds through ancient forests and forgotten settlements, the dragon's presence can still be felt in the sudden chill that descends without warning. The inexplicable sense of being watched from the depths of dark pools, and the knowledge that some secrets of the Pennsylvania mountains are older and more terrible than anything European settlers ever imagined. Let's move to our 11th and last story. The enduring mystery of the screaming woman of the Horrors, a phenomenon that has haunted the deepest valleys of Appalachia for generations, terrifying locals with blood-curdling shrieks that pierce the mountain night. Unlike the legendary creatures and historical hauntings we've explored, this is a contemporary horror, an ongoing pattern of unexplained screams echoing through remote hollows that defies rational explanation and continues to traumatize residents across multiple states, from Virginia to North Carolina to Kentucky. The phenomenon is as widespread as it is disturbing. Across the Appalachian region, residents in isolated communities report the same terrifying experience. Nighttime screams that sound unmistakably human, always female, filled with such anguish and terror that they freeze the blood of anyone who hears them. These are not the brief cries of animals or the distant sounds of domestic disputes, but prolonged, agonized shrieks that echo through the valleys with an otherworldly quality that seems to amplify and distort as it bounces off ridge walls and through the dense forest canopy. One of the most disturbing aspects of these encounters is their consistency across different geographic locations and time periods. In Scott County, Virginia, residents describe a pattern that became particularly intense during the late 1990s and early 2000s. Local families reported hearing what they described as a woman screaming like she was being murdered. Sounds so distinctive and terrifying that multiple households would simultaneously call local authorities, convinced they were witnessing an actual crime in progress. When police and search teams investigated these reports, they invariably found nothing. No evidence of violence, no signs of struggle, and most disturbingly, no logical source for the screams. The psychological impact on communities experiencing these phenomena is profound and lasting. One Scott County resident recalled how their grandmother heard the screams one night and was so shaken by the experience that she refused to go outside after dark for weeks afterward. Another family described hearing the screaming while getting alcohol poisoning in a farmer's back 40. Even in their intoxicated state, the sound was so unnatural and disturbing that it sobered them instantly and sent them fleeing back to civilization. What makes these screams particularly unsettling is their acoustic properties. Witnesses consistently describe how the sound seems to echo and reverberate through the hollows in ways that natural sound shouldn't, creating an effect that one resident described as like screaming in a concert venue. The screams appear to have an almost supernatural ability to carry vast distances, with families separated by miles of mountain terrain reporting identical sounds occurring simultaneously. This acoustic phenomenon has never been adequately explained by sound engineers or acoustic specialists who have studied the reports. The High Knob Mountain area near Scott County became such a hotbed of screaming incidents that residents finally demanded answers from local wildlife authorities. The game warden's response was cryptic and unsatisfying. He stated that he couldn't confirm nor deny that mountain lions had been released into the wild on the High Knob Mountain. This non-answer only fueled more speculation and fear among locals, who pointed out that mountain lions, while known for their distinctive vocalizations, don't produce the specific type of prolonged, human-like screaming they were experiencing. Modern technology has captured some of these unexplained vocalizations, creating audio evidence that defies easy categorization. Hikers and campers throughout Appalachia have recorded sounds that professional wildlife experts cannot identify. One particularly haunting recording captures what sounds like a combination of human screaming with animalistic fury. A sound so disturbing that even hardened investigators admit it makes their skin crawl. The recordings often capture not just the screams themselves, but the eerie silence that follows. A complete absence of normal forest sounds, as if every living creature in the area has been frightened into absolute stillness. The phenomenon extends beyond simple vocalizations to include what researchers term lure screaming, instances where the cries seem deliberately designed to draw people deeper into dangerous terrain. Local folklore and safety guidelines specifically warn against investigating screams in the woods, with experienced mountain residents teaching their children a fundamental rule. If you hear screaming in the woods, ignore it and don't go towards the direction of the screams to try and help. That is something trying to lure you further into the forest. This warning takes on additional weight when considered alongside documented cases of people who have disappeared after investigating such sounds. While no direct causal relationship has been established, the timing and circumstances of some disappearances align disturbingly with reports of unexplained screaming in the same areas. Search and rescue teams have noted that missing person cases in certain Appalachian regions often involve individuals who were last seen heading toward areas where other hikers reported hearing distressing vocalizations. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park has been a particular focus for these phenomena, with multiple documented incidents involving hikers and campers. One of the most famous cases involves Harold Key, who was having a family picnic when he heard what he later described as a scream that was enormous and sickening and fundamentally wrong. Key, who had decades of experience in mountain living, emphasized that the sound wasn't a cry of an animal or anything he'd ever heard, and wasn't a human in distress. The timing of this incident, occurring shortly after the disappearance of Dennis Martin, a 6-year-old boy who vanished in the park, has led some researchers to theorize connections between the screaming phenomena and missing person cases. Scientific attempts to explain the screaming have produced various theories, none of which fully account for all reported characteristics. Wildlife biologists point to red foxes, which can produce surprisingly human-like vocalizations, especially during mating season. Fox screams can indeed sound remarkably like a woman in distress, particularly at night when other environmental sounds are minimal. However, fox vocalizations typically last only a few seconds, while the Appalachian screaming incidents often involve prolonged episodes lasting minutes at a time. Mountain lions represent another proposed explanation, though their presence in Appalachia remains highly disputed among wildlife authorities. While confirmed mountain lion populations don't exist in most of the region, occasional individual animals may wander through from western habitats. Mountain lion screams can indeed sound human-like and are notoriously chilling. But again, the vocalizations don't match the specific characteristics reported by witnesses, particularly the prolonged duration and the specific acoustic properties described. More disturbing are the reports that include visual components alongside the screaming. Some witnesses describe seeing shadowy figures in connection with the sounds, shapes that appear human but move in ways that suggest something else entirely. These sightings typically occur at the periphery of vision and in poor lighting conditions, making positive identification impossible. But the consistency of descriptions across different incidents and locations suggests a pattern that goes beyond simple misidentification. The cultural impact of the screaming woman phenomenon extends deep into Appalachian folklore and daily life. Children grow up learning to distinguish between different types of nighttime sounds, with particular attention paid to identifying screams that might indicate genuine human distress versus those that experienced locals recognize as something else entirely. This traditional knowledge represents generations of accumulated wisdom about surviving in mountain environments, where the line between natural and supernatural threats remains deliberately blurred. Reddit forums and online communities dedicated to Appalachian mysteries contain hundreds of first-hand accounts from individuals who have encountered the screaming phenomenon. These reports show remarkable consistency in describing not just the sounds themselves, but the emotional and physical responses they provoke. Witnesses consistently report immediate and overwhelming fear responses, often describing how the screams trigger fight-or-flight reactions so intense that even rational, skeptical individuals find themselves fleeing without conscious thought. One particularly detailed account describes how the witness initially thought they were hearing just wind going through the trees, but quickly realized they were listening to a gut-wrenching male screaming. This description highlights another disturbing aspect of the phenomenon. While most reports describe female-sounding screams, some incidents involve what appear to be male voices in equally extreme distress. The gender variation suggests either multiple sources for the phenomena or something capable of producing different vocal characteristics. The temporal patterns of the screaming add another layer of mystery. While incidents can occur at any time of year, many witnesses report increased activity during specific seasons or weather conditions. Foggy nights seem to produce more frequent reports, as do periods following significant weather events like storms or unseasonably warm spells. Some researchers theorize that atmospheric conditions might enhance the transmission of sounds, making normal animal vocalizations seem more disturbing than usual. But this doesn't account for the specific human-like qualities witnesses describe. Modern paranormal investigators have attempted to document and study the screaming phenomena using sophisticated recording equipment and investigative techniques. However, these efforts face significant challenges. The sounds occur unpredictably, often in extremely remote locations, and seem to have an uncanny ability to avoid direct documentation. Investigators report equipment malfunctions, battery drains, and recording failures that coincide with reported incidents, leading some to speculate that whatever produces the screams actively avoids technological documentation. The integration of the screaming woman legend into contemporary Appalachian rules and folklore represents a fascinating evolution of traditional mountain wisdom adapted for modern circumstances. The rules that govern behavior in the Appalachian wilderness now explicitly address the screaming phenomenon, demonstrating how communities adapt their survival strategies to incorporate unexplained threats alongside known dangers like wildlife, weather, and terrain hazards. Perhaps most unsettling is the way the phenomenon seems to be expanding both geographically and in intensity. Reports that were once confined to the most remote and isolated regions now occur in areas with regular human activity, including established hiking trails and campgrounds. This expansion suggests either a genuine increase in whatever produces the screams or a growing awareness and documentation of phenomena that previously went unreported. The screaming woman of the hollers represents the most contemporary and ongoing of all Appalachian mysteries. A phenomenon that bridges ancient fears with modern documentation, traditional folklore with technological investigation. Unlike historical legends that can be safely relegated to the past, these screams continue to echo through the mountains today, reminding us that the Appalachian wilderness still holds secrets that challenge our understanding of the natural world. For those who venture into the deep hollows and remote ridges of Appalachia, the message remains clear. If you hear a woman screaming in the darkness, trust the wisdom of generations and turn away. Some sounds in the mountains are not meant to be investigated, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. The screaming woman continues her nightly vigil in the hollers, her cries serving as the final warning that in the ancient heart of Appalachia, we are never truly alone, and we are never truly safe. As we reach the end of our terrifying journey through the 11 most disturbing true Appalachian Mountains horror stories, we've witnessed how these ancient ridges and forgotten hollows harbor secrets far darker than their misty beauty suggests. From the Bell Witch's vengeful haunting that claimed a man's life, to the Mothman's ominous warnings before tragedy struck, to the screams that still echo through the hollers tonight. Each story serves as a chilling reminder that the Appalachian Mountains are more than just geological formations. They are repositories of fear, mystery, and the unexplained. What makes these stories truly terrifying isn't just their supernatural elements, but their foundation in documented history, eyewitness testimony, and ongoing encounters that continue to this day. These aren't mere campfire tales. They're warnings passed down through generations, carved into the collective memory of communities that understand the mountain's true nature. The Cherokee knew it, the early settlers learned it, and modern witnesses confirm it. Some places on Earth were never meant for human habitation. If you've made it this far, you've proven you have the courage to confront the darkness that lurks in America's oldest mountain range. But remember, knowledge comes with responsibility. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're survival guides for anyone brave enough to venture into the deep woods and forgotten valleys where civilization fades and ancient terrors still roam. Verified fears will continue to uncover the documented horrors that official sources prefer to ignore. Subscribe now, because the truth is always more terrifying than fiction. And in the Appalachian Mountains, the truth has been screaming in the darkness for centuries, waiting for someone bold enough to listen. Sweet dreams. And remember, when you hear something calling your name in the mountain fog, sometimes the wisest choice is to pretend you never heard it at all.